Hey, it's Becky, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Stormcrow by Kalyn Josephson. The Stormcrow is set in a kingdom which is completely dependent on crows for kind of everyday life, and they are huge giant crows that have magic powers to help assist with like magic, fire, storm, battle, darkness, and light. Oh, and storm. Did I say storm? But anyway, in The Stormcrow, the book starts off with an attack on the capital of Rhodaire, where all the crows and the unhatched eggs are killed. And after this attack, our main character, who is the second princess of this kingdom, is kind of thrown into a depression whilst her sister rules the country and tries to avoid another attack. However, in order to make peace, Anthea is then promised to be married to the prince of the kingdom that attacked theirs, and there's kind of a lot of resentment there until she finds a hidden crow egg and she needs to figure out how to hatch it and to save her kingdom. Stormcrow has one of the best introduction scenes I've read in a while. It starts off with us kind of on the back of a crow and we're flying, and it's just a very magical and fantasy focused writing style, and I just loved reading about it. This scene also helps understand exactly what Thea loses later on in the book when they're attacked, because being with a crow, riding the crow, feels so like all of your adrenaline is running, and it's kind of endorphins are pumping, and you're just so happy when you're kind of flying through the skies. It was also the perfect introduction to both the crows that we don't see for most of the book, but also our main character, who is obviously in love with being a crow rider. But after this scene, it's straight into the action and we get the kind of attack on Rhodaire. The city of Aris is actually setting up for a festival, so we kind of we're immediately introduced to kind of the culture that's in the city. And then it's horrible attack where there's fire everywhere, there's people shooting things, and there's just terror. Our main character doesn't quite know what to do. Her and her friend are running towards the kind of nesting area where her family is, and we see multiple people get kind of burned and hurt in this scene. This is also the scene where Thea's mother dies, who we actually met earlier on in the book and she doesn't have the best relationship with. The fact that she lost her mother after a not very nice discussion with her also is something that really kind of hits hard in this book, that she misses her mother so much and she wishes she could have made up for it in life. However, after this, Thea kind of falls into depression and her sister Kalyn must take the throne. This book handles depression and grief so well. It also has a little bit of PTSD for a side character, which I'll talk about a bit later. The elation and ease at which Anthea rides the crow in the first scene is completely freeing compared to the depression and the grief she feels after the attack. And it really helps show us what she was losing, because there's nothing that can make her feel better during her depression. There's nothing that can help pull her out of it, because the one thing that she loved is not there anymore. I also found that the depression, the way it was discussed and the way it was handled by other people was so well written, and I don't think I have the words to describe it properly in this review, but it was very understandable. Our main character struggled to get out of bed, and when she does get out of bed she just wants to go straight back to it, and I've definitely felt that before, so it made me feel so empathetic towards her. And it also made the book seem so much more real, because there was real emotions and real consequences to actions. I feel like a lot of fantasy books, loads of bad things happen and they feel sad and then they get over it. The depression in this book comes up repeatedly over and over again, and I've already read the second book. It comes up in the second book as well, and it's not something like they kind of get rid of. It's just something that you learn to live with, and some days are better than others. And the level of self-doubt she has because of this, the fact that she feels weak and that she can't do anything, and it's just so on the nose, and we see her developing in the book on ways to cope with things, and the fact that she's being depended on by other people both pushes and harms this depression, because she doesn't know what she wants, because she doesn't know if she can do it. Her best friend and her guard, Kiva, also has some mental health issues. Specifically, she has a mild form of PTSD. I don't know how in-depth that is because our main character is Thea and we only see through her eyes. However, Kiva does struggle with it after killing someone in her line of duty, and it was in defense of Thea herself, and I think Thea she does hold a little bit of guilt for the fact that she's feeling this way. However, I really enjoyed that it was shown that it wasn't just our main character who was suffering, other people were suffering as well. And whilst she's Thea's bodyguard and best friend, it does take her some time to actually confide in Thea that that's what happened and that's what she's feeling. And I really enjoyed the way her kind of background story arc went, as she goes with her to the different kingdom, but then they have to do separate things. She has to rebuild her own life whilst Thea's rebuilding hers. And whilst they can depend on each other and they can talk to each other, I liked that they weren't always together, they weren't joined at the hip. And Kiva had her own story that wasn't connected to Thea only, and she made her own friends, and yeah, it's not something that was shown deeply in the book, but we knew it was happening in the background. On top of Thea and Kiva, this book really focuses on strong women. Most of the main characters in this book are women, including Thea's sister Kalyn, who is the queen. Their mother before them was also queen. They didn't have a father in the picture. And then the kingdom that attacked Illucian is also run by a queen. And then on the Rhodaire side of women, they don't always agree with each other. There's a lot of strong emotions and relationships between them, but I really enjoyed how they were all struggling. And Kalyn isn't really focused on because we only see it through Thea's point of view, and she, I guess, avoids her sister at times because of the circumstances that are surrounding them. However, I believe that she's probably struggling a lot as well internally because she's being forced to take a throne that she perhaps wasn't ready for, alongside her grief and maybe her own depression as well. I think I would love to have at least like a point of view chapter of Kalyn just to see what she's thinking, as she's such an interesting character to me. And I enjoyed how her relationship to her sister was developed and how they're clearly not close, but they were close, but then at the same time they're sisters, they love each other, and they do mature as the book goes on to be more communicative. And on the other side, we have the Illucian queen, Roselle. She takes a very different approach to ruling her kingdom. She's ruthless, and a lot of her subjects, including her son, are a little bit scared of her. As she is a warrior queen, she's very skilled with her blades, and she's just a scary kind of woman. We're told of her motivations from mostly secondhand sources, but so they're not completely reliable in the first book. However, if they're true, the motivations are true, then I do understand the motivations, and it's a well thought out reasoning for why she's doing the things she does, even though she is the bad guy. Whilst in Rhodaire, they're thinking that her attacking them is mostly needless murder. It is more of a revenge plotline and is kind of thought out as a getting back at them, rather than just deciding to kind of try to take over the continent. There's also rican, who is Roselle's son, on the bad side, and I really enjoyed his character because he has a constant need to be liked and respected by everyone, including his mother. Because of this, it makes him make bad decisions sometimes, and it makes him act in different ways. He's constantly changing up his demeanor. With different people he acts different, and even with Thea, he's constantly changing who he is, which obviously changes her opinion of him almost daily for the first part of the book. And what I did love is that because of the way Thea treated him from the beginning, his reaction to her and to Kiva as well, to anyone in Rhodaire, changes throughout the book and matures, and I enjoyed the building friendship they had throughout it. I think there's a lot of layers to his character that we haven't really explored yet in this book. I'm hoping that in the next book it sees it a lot more clearly and it lays down a lot more information. However, you do kind of want to root for him as well. He's a character that you both like and hate at the same time because of his bad decisions, but you kind of understand his decision-making process, and it's not because he's a bad person, but because he's kind of trying to get respect from his mother. With the loss of the crows at the start of the book, I feel like there's really not a lot of magic in this book at all. There is a little bit, but it's not really explored as much as it could have been. And I think because we're seeing it through Thea's eyes and she's not been fully trained yet, We don't have a lot of information that we could have had if we'd stayed in Rhodaire and we were with people who knew what they were doing. For example, one of the main conflicts in the book is that they find an egg but they don't know how to hatch it because that was a big secret and no one knows how to do it anymore because their mother died. And whilst that probably wouldn't have helped if they'd stayed in Rhodaire, I think it's interesting to know that the lack of communication is not great in this book, and the lack of communication caused more problems later down the line. However, once Res comes into the picture, there's a lot more magic and I started getting even more into it than I already was. And there's a lot of a sense of curiosity for me to read more and to read the next book to find out what more magic there is and to see if there's kind of a deeper meaning behind it, which there's kind of hinted at in the book. On top of magic, there's also a lot of world building. We find out so much about Rhodaire, but also Illucia, and everything's really good. You kind of can picture in your mind when you read it that there's different segments of the city that are dependent on different crows and different powers, and this changes because obviously the crows are no longer there. We get this through kind of a tour of Erican has to take throughout the city, led by Thea, and this gives us a lot of background and culture to the city itself and the kingdom, but it also gives us a lot of background to Thea, which I thought was helpful to learn more about her at the beginning of the book too. This is also the perfect timing to explain to us what the different crows are and why they're different. That there's battle crows, but not everyone has to ride crows. They can use them to just help heal people and to do magic and be a regular citizen in this kingdom. And then in turn, once we go with Erican to Illucia, we get kind of a tour from him to Thea, and we learn a lot about Illucia as a new person into the kingdom, which I thought was really helpful. And there's just a lot of background world building, which I adored. On top of the kind of kingdoms, there's also a kind of religion in this book, which is this is in the history of Rhodaire, but also in Illucia, and I think the sellers are going to be a bigger part of the second book because they seem to be emphasized a lot in this book, and there's really not a lot of information about them at all. And I'm wondering if they're one of the ways that they're going to help get the crows back, as we've only got one right now. Overall, I really enjoyed The Storm Crow, and I started reading Crow Rider basically immediately after finishing it because I wanted to know what was happening to the characters, I wanted to know more about the magic, I wanted to know more about these worlds, and it's just enjoyable all around. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, just remember to give it a like. Thank you.